circle. I think we talked to like 100 people. Like I'm not even exaggerating.
Mm.
To get to where we were, we had so many different iterations because people dropped out because of fear for their life.
Welcome to Postgrads. Two Columbia J School alumni walk into a bar, Tavleen. What do you think the punchline should be?
How about who's covering this round?
Of course. I mean, some of our previous guests come in and say journalism industry does not have money, and I was like, yeah, we're not running out of sources. Today we have Tavleen Tarrant, who graduated from Columbia Journalism School in 2022, specializing in documentary filmmaking, and is now a social news gathering reporter at NBC News. Thank you for joining us today,
Thanks for
Tavleen.
having me.
Okay, Tavleen, in your past experience, you have lived in 8 different cities across 6 countries. I want to name them out: Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, France, Australia, and the United States. How did different backgrounds enhance your storytelling ability?
Yeah, I guess if I could sum it up, I think being living in so many different countries and being around so many different types of people, it exposes you to so many different kinds of stories that maybe aren't covered in like mainstream Western narratives, stories from people like in Southeast Asia, which often sometimes get neglected. And I think that's sort of what has driven me into journalism is to try and tell some of these stories and try and bring my background with me and, tell the stories of people whose maybe voices aren't being heard, especially working in mainstream media. So yeah, I think it definitely influenced me a lot.
What inspired you to be a journalist when you
Mm.
grew up?
Yeah,
First
so
time.
my father was a journalist.
Oh.
Yeah, he worked at Reuters
Mm.
for 35 years. He retired in 2020 at the end of 2020. And so growing up, I was exposed to journalism from a really early age because he was a foreign correspondent. So we lived all over Asia because of my dad's job, even though he's American. But yeah, that really influenced me, but I still didn't want to become a journalist because I was exposed,
Too
to
much?
yeah, I could see how difficult of a life it could be, and how stressful as well it is, how much my dad was like working a lot, obviously with breaking news, there's always something, if he had to be like whisked away to some country or to the office. And then during the pandemic, everything was like on pause, right? And it was like I was applying for jobs and getting nowhere. And so I started freelancing. And I think that's what really I was like, wow, I actually really like this. I'm getting bylines, and I was getting things published, even though I didn't really have a whole lot of journalism experience. So I always had a passion for documentary
Mm.
filmmaking, particularly. I wanted to do filmmaking like since that was my number one career choice since I was a kid.
Mm.
And it just didn't really work out when undergrad. Like I did film studies, but I didn't really like it. Also, I was trying to pick something a little more practical. I think a lot of people who come from an Asian background, and have Asian family members like understand this, that, you
You
try
want to
and
achieve your goal.
yeah, to try and do something practical. But I think then my mom and others could see that like this was something that I was still passionate about. Even after graduating college, I still hadn't, the passion hadn't died. So I decided to apply for the documentary program at Columbia Journalism School. And I got in, and yeah.
So you made a documentary in 2022 called Allies Welcome about the lives of Afghan refugees in the United States after Taliban's captured Kabul. How was your experience working on that project?
I'm really interested in as I mentioned, really interested in Asia and South Asia particularly, and Southeast Asia. And at that time in 2021, when we had just started Colombia, in August 2021, that's when the Taliban took over Kabul and took over Afghanistan, and that was really big news, obviously, because the US pulled out, and it was just, a whole series of things. And so me and my film partner, Shakib, we both like really were interested in this topic. Shakib is from Pakistan, and so he obviously had a lot of experience covering, Afghanistan. And we wanted to he proposed this topic, and we decided to do it. We decided to work together. And yeah, it was difficult, but we did it. And we basically, the film is about three people who, two of them are journalists, one worked in the nonprofit sector, who were all basically, resettled in the US because they were forced to leave because they were involved with the US or other Western governments, and, their lives were very much at risk.
Yeah.
And it was about their journey trying to resettle in New York and in Maryland, in Silver Springs, Maryland, and just the difficulties of it, and just life, away from home, and the feeling that they'll never be able to go back home.
I can kind of relate it to, because my master's thesis paper is also refugees relocate to the United States.
Wow.
And I can imagine, like, how did you convince them to participate and also show their faces on camera?
That was actually really difficult. I think we talked to like 100 people. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. To get to where we were. We had so many different iterations because people dropped out because of fear for their life. It's so understandable, obviously, because we're asking them a big thing. We're not just asking them to, be interviewed. We're asking them to put their face and put their name out there. Yeah. And we're asking them to expose a lot about their life and to be really like raw and, so yeah, there were a lot of people that we filmed with and talked to. There were a lot of people also who were like, hey, I'm interested, but can you, I don't want anything, like, I want myself to be muted. I want like yeah. And we were like considering it, but then when we got these three people on board who were like, we'll do it, we were like, this is, because we were thinking, what should we do? Should we like do, because we only have a meager budget as well. So it's like, okay, how much can we devote to like animation, and all these things to try and cover up these people's identities? I mean, it's difficult. It's asking a lot, so we understood, and we knew it was going to be a challenge. We definitely knew that we were taking a bit more of a challenging route with our thesis.
So you worked as freelance journalist before you entered CGS. What is the difference between freelancing journalist and the fully employed? And do you prefer one lifestyle over the other?
Yeah, okay. So I freelanced for some years.
3 years.
Yeah, before J school, and then even during J school, and then after J school as well. And now obviously I'm a full-time employee. I would say personally for me, I do prefer being a full-time employee. I mean, there are perks to being a freelance self-employed journalist. You can kind of cover what you want because it's based on, what it's you're your own boss,
Yeah.
You pitch the stories you want, you cover what you want. You can work your own hours, you can choose what assignments you want to do. There are some perks like that, but for me personally, I knew I didn't want to do that forever because it's incredibly hard to maintain. It's a lot of hustling, you have to, I was constantly sending pitches, and a lot of times sometimes you get lucky and an editor would respond and give you a rejection at least, but a lot of times it would just go nowhere, and it's just like a black hole. Yeah, and honestly, I wasn't always covering stories I wanted to cover. In fact, a lot of the stories I was covering was like client kind of stories. Like, I covered a lot of health stories, higher education stories. I would like having steady clients that would, commission you for pieces, especially like trade publication clients is really helpful because they tend to be more stable and they pay more.
Mm.
But a lot of times you think when you're going to be a freelancer that you can write all these like great exposés and like investigate pieces and like personal essays or whatever. And the reality is like that doesn't pay the bills. That's the fun stuff that you can do on, as to supplement, but the things that are going to pay the bills are still things that you would have to do in a regular newsroom. So
Mm.
for me, I definitely prefer having a full-time job.
NBC News has a big name in the industry. I can imagine the pressure you're under working as a news gatherer. Can you please tell our audience, like, what are the duties of news gathering journalists?
Yeah, so for my role, I work in the social news gathering department at NBC News.
Mm.
We are basically a visual verification team.
Mm.
So we work on like OSINT, visual forensics stories, but we also work on breaking news.
Yeah.
We basically do like everything related to UGC, user generated content. So for example, we will um like get requests from other shows on at NBC to verify something. Let's say somebody has been murdered or something and they one of the shows wants to cover this story there and they want to request us and say, hey, can you verify this Facebook profile?
Mm.
We want to show this person's photo on the news, but we want to make sure this is legitimate, and this is definitely belongs to them. So that's our job. We will verify the profile, make sure that this social media profile belongs to this person.
Yeah.
Or for example, like let's say Iran, there's lots of protests going there right now. And so editors or producers will come to us and say, hey, we want to cover Iran tonight on the news. Can you guys verify all these videos coming out of Iran, especially if you can find like clashes, like video of, anything that's going on. And that'll be our job. We will go find, verify, geolocate, make sure that the video is new and it's not from 5 years ago. Make sure it's not AI generated. Make sure it can be geolocated. It's definitely in this part of this city, of this state, And at first, obviously it's difficult, especially when it was coming, like looking at videos of from Gaza, which, a lot of the videos, you can't really pinpoint on Google Maps because it's like all these buildings are destroyed, it's rubble. It's not going to match with Google Maps from beginning of 2023, right? So some geolocation can get really challenging and it requires a lot more, skill and technique. But yeah, that's our job.
You told us that the breaking news is a big part of your job, and we have our previous guest come and say that's a heartbeat of the newsroom. Because the thrill is just different. What is your experience working on breaking news?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, breaking news is, I think that's a great quote, that person said. It really is, the heartbeat of the newsroom. I mean, breaking news it's a lot of adrenaline,
Mm.
I mean, breaking news is pretty much my everyday life, but some breaking news is bigger than, obviously. There's some days where the breaking news is a little slower or is a little smaller. And then there's other days, like, for example, when we had the shooting of Renee Good or Alex Preddy, those, are really big days. Or, when the war in Gaza started unfolding, that was a really big day, There are definitely some stories that are like, everyone in the newsroom is, you can hear everyone's just kind of going crazy and,
Mm.
all the monitors are on and you can hear all these different voices and the TVs are on.
Yeah, I think there's also part of pressure is like right now the news organization, news agencies want to be the first to
Yeah,
report on the breaking news, right? Do
definitely.
you have that kind of
Definitely.
pressure?
I mean, so we obviously there's that want to be the first, but we also prioritize being accurate. Being the first is important, but being accurate is more important. So
I
if that
agree.
means someone beats us to the scoop, then so be it, But at
Mm.
least we can be sure that what we're reporting is true and people aren't going to come to, we're not going to have to retract anything, or issue a
Or
correction.
craft it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just
exactly.
want
Which
to
is
say
like
it.
every journalist's like worst nightmare is the correction.
I want to go to your article, your latest article, on ICE, the Trump's ICE program, and for lack of the better word, atrocities that they have committed this past few days. Um, it's a pretty hot topic right now. The your latest article is about ICE agents being blocked from entering Ecuadorian ministry in Minneapolis. How is your experience working in the newsroom while ICE being ICE on the street in Minnesota?
Yeah, it's definitely been a big topic for our newsroom. I mean, every day there's just new reports coming out of Minnesota. I mean, it's all over the US, obviously, but I think we're seeing especially heightened tensions in Minneapolis. So I can talk about that story a little bit. But my coworker, she wrote the story, and then I verified along with another coworker the videos to make sure that it was accurate and that this was, true. But basically, it seemed like a federal agent tried to enter the Ecuadorian consulate in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, and was prevented from doing so because the consulate members obviously did not want them to come in. And we're seeing a lot of stories kind of like this of, federal agents that are um, overstepping their bounds, or at least that's how I think a lot of people could describe it as. It's been challenging because there's just been so much news and we can't cover everything, and it's an overwhelming amount. We're seeing protests every day. We're seeing people come together to help their neighbors, which is, obviously amazing and nice to report about. We're also seeing a lot of just everyday new footage coming out of, federal agents going, to different neighborhoods. And then obviously this past weekend, we saw there was Alex Preddy, the ICU nurse who was killed by federal agents. And that was a big topic. And I was off those days because I was it was on Saturday. I don't work on Saturday, but I had some coworkers who covered that when it broke, and it was a big story. But I was there on the day that Renee Good was shot, and that was a huge story for. I mean, not just
first.
yeah, and
news.
that was a big, heavy news day. And going through that footage is really hard. It's really sad, and obviously it's our job. But
Second by second.
yeah, it still doesn't make it any less frightening and sad. And I think as reporters, the most important thing we can do is to, just report the news, is to really reflect what's going on as accurately and fairly as we can, and to shine a light on these topics, and to shine a light on what's happening.
Yeah. Do you think that your duty as a journalist have changed while this whole immigration and the law enforcement situation keeps escalating?
I think as journalists, I mean, I've always been someone who I think holds a lot of social issues close to my heart, which, I know can be controversial at times in journalism. Some people believe that in journalism, you have to separate yourself fully from these issues, right? And I think that's changed a lot with our generation of journalists, of younger journalists who have been like, social issues and human rights issues and stories around the world are important to me. And, I'm going to cover these stories, and I think it's a duty for us to cover and shine a light. And I think it's great that that's, obviously changing. I do think perceptions are changing of that slowly but surely, especially in mainstream media. It's obviously, it's I think as journalists, we, our duty is to tell the truth, and to tell the truth is to look towards what is happening to people and talk to people on the ground and try and share their stories, whatever that may be. And I think that needs to continue being our job.
Yeah, I agree. So now we are entering a new segment of the show called Rapid Fire Questions. Are you ready, Tavleen?
Sure, I think so.
What is an underrated feature in Adobe Premiere Pro?
What? That's an interesting question. Oh my God, it's rapid fire and I'm taking so long. And Adobe Premiere Pro, I don't know. I think just like splicing content together, is the best part of Premiere Pro. I mean, it's like the whole use of it, but I mean, just being able to splice a bunch of content together,
Yeah.
the cutting and tool and everything.
It's very easy
It's
for
super intuitive.
yeah.
Yeah, super intuitive.
Which one of your articles or video project are you the most proud of?
Okay, that one I actually know how to answer. I think the one I'm most proud of, interestingly enough, is an article I wrote when I was freelancing. I wrote an article for Al Jazeera about my grandmother, and about about the partition of India and Pakistan, about now what is modern day Pakistan, but at the time, of India, and about my grandmother's journey from modern day Pakistan to India, and then to Malaysia, where she lived until she died. And so that was the story I was most proud of because it was about my family. It was very personal,
Yeah.
and it allowed us to connect to other relatives who reached out, like second cousins, and it started like a whole thing after that with my family. So it was just like really amazing. Yeah.
I can imagine it's so great to write about family
Yeah.
business.
It was definitely the
stuff.
article I got the most response on too. I
Yeah.
still got letters like years later. I'll still get people messaging me about it, saying that it inspired them to talk to their grandparents about their stories. So I'm definitely most proud of that one.
What is your favorite neighborhood in New York City?
Well, right now I live in Astoria, Queens,
Mm.
and I do really love it. But I also used to live in Harlem. Well, technically Morningside Heights, I was right at the border of I was right at the edge, like of basically Harlem because I lived like near 125th. And I do love both of those neighborhoods. I think Harlem is very underrated, and I think a lot of people are very snobbish towards Harlem,
Yeah.
and I think it's so much greater than what people realize if they just get out of their bubble. But I do love Astoria. I do love my new neighborhood. The food scene is unbeatable, I think.
And that goes to next question. In all the countries that you lived in, which one has the best food?
That's very easy, Malaysia. I mean, food is Malaysia's identity. Food is like when you think of Malaysia, like it's like the food. Not to be mean to my Singaporean brethren, but Malaysia's cheaper than Singapore too. So even
I
though the
agree.
food is similar, Malaysia wins because it's a lot cheaper too. So Malaysia wins.
Name 3 beats that you have never dipped your toe in before, but you'd love to work on in the future.
I don't know if I've never dipped my toe into, but something I would like to is like entertainment, like influencer, like culture, like online trends, because I think there's a lot of I have done some stories about influencer culture, but I think it's really interesting.
A lot of drama.
Yes, drama. 2 would be like my God, more animal stories. I actually have done some animal stories, but they're so nice to do because there's such a good change of pace, and so much more like cuter than some of the sad breaking news we get. And then 3, in terms of something I've rarely ever done, is sports journalism. I think I've written like one article. Maybe I've contributed a few to, but like one actual article, and I actually found it really interesting to do. So I think maybe some more sports journalism.
Thank you. That is the end of our rapid fire
Okay.
questions. And we're going to the end of the show.
Okay.
If you ask 6-year-old Tavleen, do you think you are living a dream life now, or is it a bit far away from your goal?
I think I would be 6-year-old me. I don't know, because 6-year-old me is like, I wanted to become like a veterinarian and like live with like 20 cats or whatever, like, but maybe like 16-year-old me,
Yeah.
like, yes, I think I'd be very happy that I'm in media. I'm working at, I made a film. Like, I think I have a lot to be proud of and a lot to be happy of. I think externally, the world that we are currently living in, I think I would be a little bit sad as a 16-year-old to see that what is all happening. I'd be a little bummed by that. But I think in terms of my career wise, I think I would like to think I would be proud of myself as a 16-year-old. Yeah.
We want you to give some advice to people who are just stepping into the world of journalism. What things should they try earlier rather than later?
Yeah. Yeah, journalism is at a very interesting point, I think, because it is so needed right now more than ever, I think. Or
Watch it.
yeah, it's more than ever. It's really needed. We really need journalists. I mean, the Trump administration arrested a few journalists today who were reporting in Minneapolis, one of them being Don Lemon, who was formerly on CNN. Journalists are facing, I mean, not just in the US, but obviously we've seen the deaths of so many journalists in Gaza who were murdered. We're seeing people struggling to make ends meet, people hustling. I think if you are someone who is a budding journalist, I think keep at it, and know that what you're doing is really important. And, don't be afraid to get outside your comfort zone. I think a lot of people want to simply have their sights set on legacy media companies. And I think you should think out of the box. I think there's so many new media companies that are coming up that are doing some of the biggest work that I'm seeing right now. One of the media companies the first ever company I freelanced for was called LA Taco. I wrote 2 articles with them. They have been doing some of the biggest journalism stories when ICE was really in LA. A lot of the big scoops were coming from LA Taco, and they're just like a small journalism, a local, very small outlet, very hyper local outlet. As bad as things are, in terms of just the news, how sad it is, it's also like a great opportunity to do some really good stories. So don't be afraid to try something new, is what I would say.
Thank you, Tavleen.
Thank you.
That's Tavleen Tarrant, and stay tuned.